Hello everyone and welcome to the final round of this year's Superbet Chess Classic. I was thinking about showing you the game Fabiano Caruana versus Richard Rapport because Fabi went into the final round with half a point lead ahead of the pack. However, that game ended in a fairly quick draw. It was heating up to be a very exciting game because Rapport's prepared a very interesting line that Fabi already played against Magnus Carlsen in the 2019 Grand Swiss tournament, but Fabi neutralized the threat very well, even though Rapport found an improvement on the line that Magnus played, but then very quickly it all ended up in a draw. So this means that if Fabi's game ends in a draw, Anish, who was trailing by half a point, now has a chance to win tiebreaks against Fabi, but he has to defeat Jan Nepomniachtchi. So let's see what happened in this game, and did he get this chance to fight Fabi for first place in the Superbet Chess Classic tournament. So here Anish has the white pieces, and he opens with pawn to e4. Sorry about that. Nepo goes for his Sicilian. We have pawn to c5, knight to f3. We have knight to pawn to e6 and pawn to d4. Striking in the center, captures, knight to f6, knight to c3, and now knight to c6. And here we have knight d to b5, countering the Taimano variation with this sort of a old school Anderson type move. We have pawn to d6 and now bishop to f4. Putting more pressure on this d6 pawn. We have pawn to e5 and now just bishop to g5, transferring into the Sveshnikov variation. If you're thinking about knight to d5 going for knight to c7, which sort of resembles something that Morphy played against Anderson long time ago, here it doesn't work because black just captures on d5 and there's nothing here. But it is a fairly similar structure. Only in that game the knight wasn't developed and the pawn was played to f5. So here bishop to g5, we have pawn to a6, knight to a3, and now pawn to b5, preparing pawn to b4. So usually people just play knight to d5 here as the knight on f6 is pinned, so you want to attack it, or you even capture on f6 and then play knight to d5. But here Anish prepared something special. He wants to play for a full point here. He plays knight a to b1. And okay, it's not a new move. Of course, it has been played before. We have bishop to e7. Here he trades on f6, captures, and pawn to a4 now. Nepo advances the pawn to b4. Knight to d5 now puts pressure on the bishop. And again, a lot of moves were played here. Bishop to g5 is a non-move. Bishop to e7 is a non-move. Just castling is a non-move here. But Nepo plays bishop to e6, and it is now, as of move 13, that we have a completely new game. So, okay, bishop to c4. Anish continues development. Both players castle, so castles, and the bishop to g5 now, not allowing this knight to be traded for bishop, but also it's just a very useful bishop on this diagonal. Also makes it harder for white to execute f4. So here we have queen to d3. And king to h8. Nepo wants to get his king off of this diagonal, and with this move he's basically announcing that he is ready to play f5 at some point. We have knight to d2, and now while everyone thought, okay, f5 is coming, he actually plays bishop captures on d2. He says the knight might become more powerful than the bishop, so he trades it. Queen captures, and now queen to a5. You have to defend the b4 pawn. So c3 challenges the b4 pawn, and now queen to c5. Puts pressure on the bishop here. Bishop to a2, and now b captures on c3. Sorry, not bishop to e2, bishop to a2, b captures on c3. B captures, and now knight to a5. Getting ready to put that knight on c4. Rook a to b1, and now pawn to h6, not allowing any infiltrating moves with queen to g5. So now just rook to b4, as Nepo waited with knight to c4. Now Anish has sufficient control over the c4 square. Rook a to b8, contesting the rook on the b file, and of course now queen to d3, going after the a6 pawn. Nepo defends it, queen to a7, and now pawn to h3, just creating some breathing room for the king here. And now knight to b7, and this is a beautiful move that Nepo very often finds with a little investment of time. He just wants to remaneuver the knight to c5, and his position seems to have drastically improved in just a little bit. So here, pawn to a5, knight to c5 attacks the queen, and queen back to e2. We have rook to b5 now, and rook captures on b5. It's a pawn sacrifice, but you will see why. Captures, queen captures on b5, and now, while you could capture on e4, first rook to b8 attacks the queen, queen back to e2, and only now queen captures on a5, winning back your material. With bishop to c4, and now queen to a3. Just going active with the queen. Now the rook is coming to b2 to put pressure on the queen here. You could also consider bishop captures on d5, for example. Bishop captures, queen captures on c3, but then bishop captures on f7, so you don't really win a pawn. So you have to avoid that. So queen to a3 was played, queen to f3, and now king to h7. We have rook to e1, adding another defender here, and queen to b2. We have rook to d1 now, and rook to a8. Now preparing to bring the rook into the game, maybe rook to a2 if the bishop moves, or even just rook to a1, just to trade off the pair of rooks. So here we have knight to e3, and the immediate rook to a1. We have bishop captures on e6, f captures, and now knight to c4, putting pressure on the d6 pawn. So rook captures on d1 with check, queen captures, and queen captures on c3. We have knight captures on d6, and now how do you continue here? Well, knight to d3. Anish's knights are very active. The material is equal. Anish does have the doubled pawn here, but shouldn't really be an issue as his pieces are very much active. Sorry, Nepo's pieces are very much active. But Anish says my pieces will become active as well. He plays knight to e8. And already you can see some dangers here. Maybe, the black king gets checkmated. So here we have queen to d4, just threatening the f2 pawn, forcing Anish to deal with that. Queen to e2, and now knight to f4. Attacks the queen here, queen to c2, and here Nepo plays queen to a1 with check. The real attempt here was queen to d8. It's such a nice move that attacks the knight here, and now, okay, queen to c2 had to be played in order to be able to retreat the knight to c7, but now queen g5 would threaten checkmate, and you would have to defend with g3 or f3, but regardless of how you defend, you would have to give up a pawn. Knight captures on h3 with check, king h2, knight f4 once again, and now the queen is stuck here guarding the g2 pawn. So g3, and now, okay, queen to h5 check, king to g1, you can go knight to h3 with check, king to g2, and now, for example, knight g5, threatening some infiltrating ideas here, but it seems that after queen to f2, white does hold this position. It's very tricky to play, and black is up a pawn, but you hold, for example, queen h3, king to g1, and everything is fine. But it was avoided by Nepo. He played queen to a1 check, as he found a different idea, one particular idea, that has something to do with checkmate. So here, king to h2, queen to f1 now, threatening checkmate, and now just pawn to f3, stopping checkmate. The queen now guards the g2 pawn, and now Nepo thought, okay, probably I have knight to e2, and then I'm just gonna checkmate the white king. The problem is there's queen to c5. This stops checkmate, and also, I mean, it's just very strong. Queen can come to a7. You can also threaten checkmate on g7. So this is something that Nepo definitely missed. But Nepo finds ways to continue, muddying up the water. So here, pawn to h5. Knight to d6, Anish now brings the knight into the game. Queen to e1. Now preparing h4 and queen to g3 check. We have knight to b5 and pawn to h4. And here Anish just plays knight to d6. He says, all right, there's nothing here. Let's just call it a day. But the position is actually completely winning for Jan. So feel free to pause the video here and win the game for Nepo while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this wild idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight to e2. The same idea that didn't work a few moves ago, now it works because the pawn is on h4. And now look at this, queen to c5. And now Nepo throws the win away, at least for the moment, because here he should have continued queen to g3 check. The reason why it's so strong is that after king to h1 and queen to f4, going for knight to g3 check, there's no good defense. Let's say queen to c2, knight to g3 check, king to g1, or king to h2. You could also go under the mask of the queen, and then just knight to f5 check picks up the knight. And of course, if you don't go at h2, if you go king to g1, then there's queen to e3 with check, king to h2, and now just queen to e1 with an unavoidable checkmate. Sorry, for some reason my camera decided to reset itself. So after queen to c5, knight to g3 was played instead, now threatening checkmate, but now Anish just plays queen to g1. And no more checkmate. So here knight to f1 check was played, king to h1, now comes queen to c1 with check, and now knight to b7, preparing to bring the knight back into the game. Knight to g3 check, king h2, and now queen to f4, again threatening some very nasty ideas like knight captures on e4. And okay, if you grab this pawn, could be a little bit dangerous, but here comes queen to b1, an absolutely spectacular move by Anish, saying that you have no continuation here. The problem with this captures with a discovered check is king to h1, and now the white knight is lost. You can't move it. The king is on h7. So after this queen to b1 move, king to h6 was played by Nepo. There are no good discoveries here, and now just king to g1, sidestepping this nasty check. Queen to d2, now just king back to h2. We have knight to e2, but now just queen to a1, keeping the tension, putting pressure on the pawn here. Queen to f4 with check, king to h1. Knight to g3, check again, king to g1, and now queen to e3 with check. King back to h2. Queen to b6 now, putting pressure on the knight, but now just queen to c1 check, winning the c5 square. So the king has to move, knight to c5. The knight now returns to the game. We have knight to e2 and queen to e1, just offering a trade of knights, and then of course a queen and pawn endgame will be a dead draw. So here we have knight to g3, but now knight to d3. We have queen to b5, putting pressure on the knight, knight to f2, and now knight to f1 with check. We have king to g1, knight to g3, king to h2, knight to f1 check, king g1, knight to g3, king to h2, and it was in this position on move 68 that Anish and Nepo agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. The problem is, or rather, it's already a threefold repetition. So a remarkable game where Anish really tried everything to win. Nepo also had a winning chance, but he blundered it. But also the problem for Anish was that if he doesn't draw this game, if he loses this game, he also loses like $21,000. That's the difference in the standings in the Grand Chess Tour between him actually drawing or winning this game. So good for him that he drew the game. And Fabi is the winner of the event. He wins the $100,000 first prize, and that's it for this classical event. If you guys are interested, we could also show the Ding game, but that's basically it. The players, as I understand it, will remain in Romania. The Superbet Chess Rapid and Blitz will start, I believe, in some 3 or 4 days. So we're going to enjoy some quick chess as well. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Fabi couldn't pull through against Rapport, but Rapport is incredibly well prepared. He, of course, was Ding's second for the World Chess Championship match, so it was, the game could have exploded. The game could have gone either way, but it just ended up being a quick draw. But here, really exciting stuff between Anish and Nepo, but in the end, both players having their chances just ends up being a draw. So there we have it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A brief overview of the Superbet Chess Classic. I would like to thank Masin Elsarag, Dr. Heisenberg, Ding Fan, Ravishing Reptiles YouTube, and Alireza for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Superbet chess tournament, and checking up on your suggestions and everything else that happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.